With Congress failing to ratify the bill, the push for a 200 peso daily wage hike is now in limbo. Business groups warn that it could lead to mass layoffs, but labor leaders call this a long overdue correction. Joining us now is Josua Mata of the Sentro ng Nagkakaisa at Progresibong Manggagawa. Hi Joshua, thank you for joining us.
Hi Micah, and thank you for inviting me.
Okay, it's Mikey, and this wage hike bill has hit another snag, a major roadblock. Ano ho ang reaksyon nyo?
Well, obviously the wage increase bill is dead, and it was killed primarily by the president himself, Bongbong Marcos. Why? Because he actually ordered his minions in Congress to kill it, even threatening them of many things. We heard through rumors that if they pass this, in whether it is 100 or 200, then heads would roll.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think this is so? Why do you think the president, in your words, has killed this bill?
Well, because I think it's very clear that he'll listen to all the fear-mongering that were spread by big business. You've seen the position paper submitted by the economic team of Malacanang during the 11th hour in Congress, where they claim so many things, like, for example, it would lead to inflation, it would lead to unemployment. Now, these are myths that have been debunked again and again during the long deliberations in both houses, in the Senate and in the lower house. And we even presented our own studies that shows that wage increase would not necessarily lead to inflation. And in fact, it could even generate jobs. So unfortunately, the president opted to listen to big business rather than correct a historic crime, which is leaving millions of workers, minimum wage earners, earning salaries that are way below the poverty threshold for a family of 5.
Mm-hmm. How do you think the 20th Congress will act on this? Are you hopeful that we'll be able to meet halfway?
Well, with this kind of leadership that we have, I doubt if they will do anything. They've already said, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President have already shown that they have no backbone standing up against the President, no? Which is an absolute disservice to us because they're supposed to be co-equal bodies. At least the last time I checked the Constitution, Malacanang and the Congress should be co-equal. But then they just cowed down to they were so frightened to Bongbong's when Bongbong ordered them, and they just followed. So we're not expecting anything from them. But we see the 20th Congress still as a venue where we can fight for our rights, and we will go to the 20th Congress with much stronger base of organized workers this time around.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the way forward if you want a legislated wage hike across the board, the first one in 36 years. Now, Joshua, is the difference doesn't seem insurmountable. The House wants a 200 peso wage hike. The Senate wants 100 peso wage hike. What are your thoughts on the amounts being put forward? And how can we meet halfway on the amount?
That's a great question. To be honest, the difference between the two are quite significant, but it has never been so insurmountable. In fact, there was already a proposal coming from several legislators themselves, including the members of the Labor Committee of the House of Representatives, that they should just adopt the House version of 100 pesos in order to avoid the BICAM. Because we all know that there was no more time for both houses to reconcile such a big difference if both of them would stand on ground on their position. But the best way to move forward is to adopt it, and that's the clamor of many. We know that that's the clamor of many of the members of the Labor Committee of the House of Representatives. But the Speaker of the House, we suspect, ordered a missing in action chair of the Labor Committee to suddenly come out with a statement rejecting such the adoption of the Senate version at the 11th hour, which essentially triggers the death of the bill.
Mm-hmm. You know, business groups are worried. They're concerned that our economic recovery is fragile. Growth is below the 6% to 8% target. While inflation has gone down to 1.3% in May. Given these economic conditions, what do you think? Would you be happy with a 100 peso wage increase?
Well, obviously, people would be happy with 100 rather than 0 right now. And that's precisely the reason why people are so disgusted that the president opted to keep them in their poverty wages, no, rather than rather than somehow ease them by giving them even 100 peso, which could have lifted millions of minimum wage earners above the poverty threshold. But let me go back to this point about that's being bandied about around by the big business. You know, every time we ask for a wage increase, that's exactly what they say. I have been in the labor movement for 3 decades. I have never heard them say anything, no, other than malulugi, no, mawawalan ng trabaho, magkakaroon ng inflation every time we ask for a minimum wage increase. No? So these things are not new. And what they say are actually fear-mongering that, as I have said, we have debunked through empirical studies during the entire 2 years that we have been debating this bill in Congress and in the Senate.
The business groups, a lot of people are saying that only a very small percent, about what, maybe 2% of the businesses can actually absorb the cost of a wage hike. What are your thoughts on this, sir?
It's not true. I mean, business have been flourishing all these years, and they have been pocketing all the profits that their workers have been working hard to earn for them. What we're asking would only amount to about 9% to 15% and most of their profits. Is that too big a dent in their profits, if only to share it to the workers that created the wealth that they have been sitting on for many years? I mean, I think that's greed. I know capitalism is about greediness, no? But this is incredible greed. And why can't they even share a part of that? And here's the more revolting thing. Isn't it a fact that all our economic growth has always been consumption-led? That's a fact. Now, if you give more money to workers, wouldn't that lead to more consumption? And wouldn't that lead to higher economic growth? And that's the reason why we actually believe that this could have generated more jobs.
Yeah.
So enough of this about their fear-mongering of inflation, of companies closing. Enough of that. This is not about numbers anymore. This is about the moral stance of a president who has never, ever been poor. And that is the problem that we have right now.
Joshua, on another note, business groups are saying that it should be the regional wage boards that handle this issue. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, if that's the case, we would not have run to the Congress. 36 years. 36 years, and what have we got from, what did we get from all these regional wage boards? All minimum wage levels in all regions in the country are way below the poverty threshold for a family of 5. Way below. Now, can you imagine that? Now, do we want millions of minimum wage earners to continue toiling day to day, and yet they receive wages that are not even enough to feed their families? That's the question here. That's the whole point here. And I think that is what the president opted to ignore. The fact that he could have lifted at least 4 million minimum wage earners, he could have lifted them from poverty, and he dared not do it. That's the problem. What's more galling, if I may add, more galling is that they keep saying there's no more time. Yeah, but if that's a fact, then why were they able to pass the bill on mining? Is it because the speaker himself is so interested in mining, and they're not interested in the wages of workers, the minimum wages? That is a question I think people should be thinking of.
Do you trust our lawmakers?
No. Definitely not. Not after this. It's very clear. They're really, really only after their interests. They're traitors to the working class.
So what's the next step for you, sir?
Well, the next step for us is to...
If this bill doesn't see the light of day.
It's already dead. We've accepted that. No. So that means that we have to regroup, fight another day, come back to, and we go back to the 20th Congress filing another round of, another call for a wage increase. But this time around, I think workers are much more wiser. Now they know that they can never trust the leadership of Congress, and they should not take them for their word. Because remember, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Martin Romualdez, actually promised us that he will pass this in the 19th Congress. Then he reneged on his promise. So the lesson, never trust the leadership of Congress. Workers must depend on their own capacity to fight this, and we need to fight this in an organized manner.
And what's your message to all the workers that want change, that we're hoping to see a wage hike this year?
I know you're all angry, and you have a right to. I know all workers are disgusted with our leadership, and they should be. But as we always say in the labor movement, organize. don't agonize.
Okay, and your message to the employers that are resisting this wage hike, sir. What would you
Well,
like
I have
to
to
say
hand
to
it to
them?
you. You just had you just won this round, but the battle's not over. We will fight for the rightful share of workers' fruits of labor.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Joshua Mata from the Labor Group Organization.
Thank you very much for inviting